Good afternoon. It is Monday, February 10th. This is the Public Works and Finance Committee of the Moscow City Council. I am Gina Terusio. To my left is Sandra Kelly, and my right, Brandy Sullivan. Representing city staff today is Gary Riedner. And our regular agenda starts off with the approval of the January 27, 2020 Public Works and Finance Committee meeting minutes.
I move that we accept the minutes.
They look good to me.
Okay, awesome. All approved, sir.
Thank you.
Second item is the disbursement report for January of 2020. Sarah Banks.
Hi.
Hi.
So looking at expenditures for the month ending January 31st, 2020, they totaled $2,778,485.45. Our largest expenditure was payroll. That came in at $1,583,177. And January in general is another smaller month for expenditures for us as we wait for our revenue to come in, which we did receive. And our largest expenditures are dispatch fees for January through March that we sent to Whitcom, and that amount is $144,641. Our other largest expenditure is probably just our HRA Viva Trust. That was our annual contribution for employees. That totaled $53,900. A few other small ones is our 2020 Pullman Moscow Airport operating and maintenance, and we paid $32,013 for that. And professional services for Lily Street reconstruction, $24,316.
Cool. Do you have any questions?
What's the one voided check? I know it's small, but where I'm on the disbursement reports. On the
Page would that be?
I'm sorry. It's the
It's our signature
page 9 of 160.
It's $160?
No, sorry. Page 9 of 160 pages in our packet today, but it's the disbursement report. It's just a small,
Looks like our signature page, right in front of you.
go to check under
There's a
general,
voided check.
Gotcha.
the general line there.
Is that the one for $487.19? That actually, $192.69 was for our peak one. That check was voided and reissued. It was the wrong amount. And then there was also another voided check for airfare reimbursement to Mayor Lambert for $294.50, and it was reissued for $125.
Okay.
That's it, thank you.
Okay. So I think we're good with that. We'll go ahead and sign. Thank you, sir.
I got it.
Okay, our next item, thank you, Sarah, is the Sixth Street, say that fast 5 times. 6th Street Bridge Replacement Project, Mr. Belknap and Mr. Riedner both.
Good afternoon.
Hi there.
So as the council is aware, we had a flooding event, much like this last weekend, but actually a little bit more severe in April of 2019, that caused some damage to the 6th Street Bridge culvert system that's located there. So this is kind of a picture before it actually overtopped the road. We ended up having to close 6th Street. That we had floodwaters that were reaching up now nearly to the road surface. And as you can kind of see as the creek goes, it is a fair impediment to floodwaters. It does step down quite a bit on the downstream side of 6th Street. And it is a location where we collect a lot of debris. That event obviously carried through the course of the night. And by morning, we had fairly substantial erosional damage that happened on both on the upstream and downstream sides of that culvert structure. That structure is really not technically a bridge. It is 3 culverts of different varying sizes that have been placed, I'm sure, back when this was a county highway or county road. And then there have been various improvements to that kind of over time. But this was a condition of that structure after that flooding event. We did end up with some roadway damage and undermining of the road base there. The guardrail was left kind of hanging in the wind without any structural support. So we did place those concrete jersey barricades that you have seen out on the corridor because of the fact that that guardrail is structurally deficient and would not stop a vehicle that may have depart the roadway into the creek channel. After that flooding event in April 2019, the governor made a declaration, and it actually received federal declaration as a major disaster area for the state of Idaho, including Latah County. And that did make some funding available for assistance and recovery efforts for cities and counties and other agencies. So we did receive some both FEMA as well as insurance reimbursement for damages that are incurred. However, the FEMA program can provide reimbursement for damage to local streets, but not for roadways that are designated as a major collector / federal aid route. And unfortunately, 6th Street is designated as a major collector on the state's functional classification map. And so we were not able to receive any funding to assist with repair or restoration of 6th Street. And we have done, Streets Department did some temporary repairs to get us through the winter as we evaluated options for that location. The state of Idaho does operate a post-disaster grant program within the Community Development Block Grant Program. The maximum award in that is $100,000 per event, and you must make application within 1 year of the event where the damage occurred, which is why we're here before you today. Other projects that are happening in that vicinity include the Mountain View project. So this is Joseph Street, so picking up just south of Joseph and up through the 6th Street intersection, including construction of a widened roadway, bike lanes, sidewalks on both sides, and then the installation of a roundabout at the intersection of 6th and Mountain View. But unfortunately, that project, due to funding limitations, ends just to the east of the culvert crossing or just prior to reaching that location. That project is currently in final design and right-of-way acquisition, so we are currently working on acquiring the right-of-way necessary for that project to be constructed, and the actual construction year is dependent upon available funding. We are kind of estimating at this point in time that it could be as soon as 2023 or 2024, but it will be dependent upon available funding and completion of right-of-way acquisition for the project. With that project ending there, once that's complete, we have a full roadway section there to the west of Paradise Creek, and so this crossing will end up as being a choke point and a constraint where we will not have pedestrian facilities, sidewalks, or bike lanes. And so it will, if we aren't able to take any other improvements, that will end up being a gap in our roadway system. As I mentioned, that is an existing culvert system, substandard. It does have, we feel, inadequate flood conveyance, and it is one of the more significant debris collection points on the channel system. Bridge Street being the other that has kind of the 4 side-by-side box culverts. This is probably our next highest debris collection point during those flooding events. Once Mountain View is completed, it would be a fairly significant choke point for pedestrian and bicycle facilities. So after these flooding events, we did do assessments looking at potential culvert extensions. I mean, you could certainly extend those culverts and do a concrete head wall to try to get the width for pedestrian and bicycle facilities, but you are not addressing the hydraulic conveyance or the debris collection issue that we have there. And it will continue to have that obstruction. Ultimately, after analyzing that and just even doing the culvert extensions is probably half the cost of a bridge. We felt that the preferred long-term alternative would be to pursue an actual bridge installation and removal of those culverts. Unfortunately, they're not inexpensive. We are estimating, and this is really based on the recent 3rd Street Bridge estimates, and then forecasting those to a construction year of 2021. Just over $1 million for construction and about $150,000 for design on the project. We do feel that there are opportunities for a lower cost bridge structure here. The right-of-way was very constrained at the 3rd Street location. It was driving higher cost construction because we could not obtain any easements from adjacent property owners for construction. And this location, we have a wider right-of-way. We do not have as many driveways located in close proximity to the bridge. That gives us more vertical flexibility in design, and we feel that there are potentially some lower cost precast concrete arch structures that could bring that cost down. But for now, we're using that as our planning estimate for the project. So we are looking at potential ways of funding it. We have about $80,000 in funds that will be coming back from FEMA for work that was already completed in response to flood activities that happened in April. And so these are debris removals and minor repairs. So everything that's already been completed, the city has already paid for, we will get some reimbursement. And those monies could be identified to be allocated to this project. In the development of the FY 2020 budget, administration understood that there would be some repairs necessary, and there was $100,000 in LID construction that was available. So that was actually transferred during the 2020 budget development, and it is a line item available for use on this project. And then in addition, there is that Department of Commerce grant with a maximum award of $150,000 for that post-disaster grant. That would leave $827,000 left in general fund street accumulation capital funds that would have to be allocated to the project, which we do have in the street fund to enable to accomplish this project. Now, there are a number of other projects that are programmed in the street fund. A Street reconstruction obviously is happening this year. That project has already been funded. Almond Street resurfacing was also anticipated in the budget this year. That would be able to continue. Lily Street is programmed for construction, and it was planned for this year. It's actually being deferred to next year so design can be completed. So that'd be a 2021 project. Mountain View for the grant, if it's 23 or 24, we'd be able to meet our local match. And then our local highway safety improvement grants on 3rd, 6th, and Polk are all anticipated, as is the proposed local highway safety improvement project at A and Baker. That was the compact roundabout installation, as well as South Main Underpass. So all of those projects are forecast and planned for, and this, utilizing the street capital accumulation would not jeopardize any of those projects. What we would see a reduction in is our surface treatment program. So if we're able to use this funding for the bridge, we would reduce our surface treatment expenditures to about $300,000 a year for the next 2 years. That is kind of comparable to our 9-year historical average, has been about $350,000. It is less than what we've spent for the last 3 years. And so there would be a little bit of a deferral of some of the surface treatments in order to fund this project. And so this is kind of our historical 9 years of expenditures in that surface treatment program. And this includes everything from a slurry seal to a chip seal to a grind and inlay. And you'll see that in 2011 to 16, we were averaging somewhere between 300,000 or as low as 73 when we were doing an accumulation, so we could do a larger project in 2016. In 17, we had some additional gas tax revenues that came to the city, so we were able to increase the surface treatment program. We also had a grant we received in 2018 that we were able to put some more money to surface treatment, and 19 was also fairly high. So the past 3 years have been fairly high, and we've been able to actually come back and make a second application on roadways that we have done first applications. So we're kind of making that second round on those roadways. But we would be at a slightly reduced level for the next 2 years in order to accommodate the bridge project.
If I could chime in too. You see the big jump from 16 to 17. There's a couple of reasons for that. As Bill indicated, we did receive gas tax funding. They increased the highway user fees, is what they call that. And of course, we get a portion of road and bridge tax to help support that as well. But the main thing that happened in that year is we switched we call it the pavement management program. Previous to that, it was the overlay program. Overlay meaning just anything you put on the surface of the street. Pavement management is more of that actively managed surface treatment, and as Bill indicated, it could range from putting slurry seal on to actually grinding the street out and inlaying new pavement. In 2017, we transferred the overlay program, renamed the pavement management program, from our operating budget into our capital budget. The reason we did that is if you look between 2015 and 2016, the actual expenditures that year were $73,125 for quote-unquote overlay, but there was money that was left in there that was allowed to accumulate for the next year, which is why it came up to $306,000. So you're not supposed to do that in an operating budget. You can do that in a capital budget. That's why we transferred the whole PMP program into capital, and it then included all of those other treatments, because typically the grind and inlay would have been in the capital budget anyway. So now they're combined into one line item, which is why that increased quite a bit. So I think in our strategic planning, One of our goals was to fund the PMP program, street treatments, in about $800,000 per year. In fact, that isn't just slurry seals and overlays. It includes all of these other things as well. So some of that money actually is used for capital. So that's why you see that big increase. So when Bill's talking about the average, he's talking about what has traditionally been spent on just those surface treatments.
And that 300,000 that we're projecting is exclusively just for surface treatments. There are some projects we're anticipating that'll be grind and inlays that'll be happening in the next 2 years. So actually to be more comparable, because grind and inlays are in these numbers, in 2022, there would be another 335,000 on another street project that's a grind and inlay. So that year would be 636,000 or so. So it is not dramatically different than some historical expenditures, but certainly it is less than what we've been able to do for the AR chip seals and the slurry seals in the last few years. But that would be what we'd be foregoing in order to be able to fund the replacement of that bridge. So really, staff this afternoon is seeking approval, or ultimately from the council at the next meeting, to prepare and submit a post-disaster assistance grant application to the Department of Commerce to assist with funding that bridge replacement. That will fund just a little over 10% of this project, so we'd like to take advantage of that program to assist that. And then also to seek council authorization to begin with the bridge design process so we can be in a position to bid the project in January of 2021.
I want to talk a moment, too, about our upcoming capital improvement program, which is why this is changed a little bit from what we've done in the past. Under previous administrations, public works directors, funds would be accumulated for particular projects, and then as a project came in, if you needed to reallocate funding that had been accumulated for a project, he would go through, marshal what funds he could, bring it to the project that wanted to move ahead, and then those accumulations would fall, then we would refund those as years went on. Under the capital improvement program that you'll be seeing here in the next 2 to 3 weeks, in advance of our strategic planning workshop, actually sets out a plan for prioritization of projects coming forward and then allocating a certain amount of money, not necessarily an amount of money just to fund that particular program or that project, but an amount of money so that we could begin the process of funding these projects systematically instead of doing it just as there's some extra money in an account. So it's much more strategic thinking and forward thinking.
So I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
The only questions I have, and not that I'm against it, I'm just looking at process. So do we have an idea of what will be put off, or how do you come up with the decisions of, we have to do this because we have extra money, what are we not going to do that we planned on?
And it really was those surface treatments were the two things. So all the street projects, and we didn't have a very long-ranging plan for street improvement projects. We know the grant applications we make applications for the LSIPs, the transportation alternatives, the TAP grants. Those always get forecast out 3 or 4 years in advance, or the urban projects like Mountain View. So when we make an application for those projects, and those are oftentimes, our local match requirement is 7.34%, the rest is federally funded. Those end up getting a construction program design year and construction year. We know we want to expend a certain amount of money on our surface treatment program just to keep up on that maintenance. But a lot of the others, we really didn't have a long-term kind of systematic plan of other roads that we know that are beyond the surface treatment stage, that are needing in reconstruction. And so we've spent the last 3 months working on developing that capital improvement plan, and soliciting the information from all of the individual operations, streets department, and then going through an evaluation and ranking based on their condition, the number of vehicles they see per day, and come up with a prioritization list. That's all kind of shown in the CIP. All the projects that we've either had on the schedule or had been accumulating monies for in the budget underneath the fund balances where they were accounted for, those will all continue, and none of those are going to be deferred or delayed. The only thing that we are looking at a reduction in is that surface treatment program for 2 years in order to be able to fund this. After that, we'd be able to build that surface treatment back up to the $500,000 to $600,000 a year that we'd like to over the course of about a 5-year time period. Once you'll see the CIP, you'll see we'll have low surface treatments for these first 2 years to accommodate the bridge, and then it builds up to 350 to 450 to 500, and we kind of get that surface treatment back up to where we want it to be. And then you'll see all the other projects we've identified, all the grant safety projects, TAP projects, and even anticipated future urban applications for Mountain View. We have 2 additional segments of Mountain View we'd like to complete, from the fairgrounds up to Joseph, because this ends there at Joseph Street. We still are substandard section from there, as well as from White Avenue to State Highway 8, to Troy Highway. So we have those also in the program for future applications that would be into the 27 to 28 to 2030 fiscal years. So really, the short term is that service treatment program being at a lower level for the next 2 years.
And about how much of that total shown for last year was the surface treatment?
For last year, if you will give me a moment, so this is everything that's considered to be a grind and inlay or a surface treatment. I do have that handy, if you wouldn't mind 1 second. Let's grab my laptop. So it does vary by year, because we did a couple grind and inlays on Mountain View, did the grind and inlay up 3rd Street, and those are included in these numbers. So for 2019, the 647,000 was almost entirely surface treatments. So slurry seal was 243,605, and the asphalt rubber chip seal was 403,403. When you look at 2018, it was a mix. We had 583,000 in slurry seals, and then we had 142,853, which was Mountain View and White Avenue grind and inlay. In 2017, it was about an even split. We had 264,000 in slurry seal, and then we had 336,705 in grind and inlays on 3rd Street and Joseph. So 2017, it was actually slightly more grind and inlay, a little bit less slurry seal. 18 was probably 3/4 surface treatments and 1/4 grind and inlays, and then 19 was all surface treatments. So it has varied kind of that percentage of what's been included in that mix over the last 3 years.
Yeah, the chip seal program, if you remember Tyler coming and talking, and Les talking to us about that, it had to do with, it was something that we hadn't done before. So it was something new and different. They thought they could get some additional life out of those streets because you could be used to surface and rehab streets that were too far gone to have an effective result from a slurry seal. So still waiting to see how that looks in the long term, but they wanted to try that last year.
And we did consult with Public Works Operations Streets Department as well. They're aware of this reduction in the surface treatment. They have, like I said, made their first round of second applications of all the roads that they think are currently good candidates for surface treatments that are not beyond repair at that stage. They're comfortable with this level of surface treatment for the next couple of years. They understand 6th Street is a priority. They would like to get the bridge replaced as well as the other projects that were identified.
I had a question for you regarding the Department of Commerce and the CDBG grants. If you are successful, we are successful receiving this one, will it affect subsequent CDBG grants?
No, this is a category in and of itself, so it doesn't compete with economic development or community infrastructure, the types of grants we access for fire engines. This is a separate category of grant.
Okay.
So it will not affect us for those.
That's good. Thank you.
I have one more question. Do we need to do anything there before January of '21? Is that?
We need to make the application for the grant, so it
No,
has to happen
I mean,
by.
like physically on that location for safety, is it going to survive until then?
Yeah,
Question.
we've assessed it. Streets indicates that even when we were expecting some flooding last week, they indicated that structurally it should be fine. The Jersey rail is safety more than anything, so nobody runs off the road. It does need to be fixed. We looked at this thing extensively after the damage of the flood of last April, and we thought we could just extend the culverts, put some head walls in. This isn't the only hydraulic constraint that we have. There are, Bill mentioned Bridge Street.
D
So D Street, there's a bunch of them. So we need to attack them one by one. So there is in the long range plan, we'll be looking at replacements for all of those culvert type bridges. We also knew with Mountain View coming up that we needed that chunk of sidewalk put in. The bridge couldn't do it. Talked about putting a bridge on the outside, a pedestrian bridge, bicycle pedestrian bridge. Didn't make any sense. So we actually had anticipated in last year's budget, or this year's budget, that we would use about $269,000 to do all these improvements. But it just didn't make sense. When Mountain View is constructed, this thing immediately will be inadequate. It's inadequate now. So with the structural damage, it just didn't make sense throwing good money after bad.
I think if we had a flooding event similar to April of 19, we would see that road get undermined again, similar damage reoccur. The repair that was done was only temporary, and there's nothing that is really protecting the base of the roadway there. It might go a little bit farther than what was damaged last time, but it's not in, imminent danger. It certainly can carry the vehicles right now. And I think with the addition of the Jersey barricades, it's safe. We are likely going to maybe push those Jersey barricades over a little bit. I think the intent was to maintain a pedestrian passageway on the south side, but we haven't seen pedestrians using it. I think people perceived it as being unsafe there, and we're now seeing pedestrians in that narrow channel between the Jersey barricades. So I think we're going to go ahead and push it back out. Because I don't think, especially during snow removal operations, when it gets bermed up, pedestrians can't even get access behind that Jersey barricade to use that area. And I've encountered pedestrians multiple times in between the Jersey barricades, and it's not as safe as we'd like it to be. So I think Streets Department is going to work on shifting those back out. But it'll be fine for the time being until we get to, and that'd just be bid. Construction wouldn't begin until spring of 2021.
Okay. We recommend approval of the grant application to the Department of Commerce for the 6th Street Bridge replacement. I'm wondering if we want to put this on regular.
Yeah, I would anticipate you would want to.
Yeah.
Mainly because it is a precursor to our CIP. I think it's going to take that sort of explanation to make the balance of the council
Okay.
comfortable with what's being proposed.
I'm a little gun shy with anything saying bridge anyway, so.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Bill. I appreciate it. Our next item is the ERP contract acceptance. Gary, what does ERP mean?
It is
Enterprise
Resource Program.
Thank you. I hate three-letter acronyms. So Sarah's back up here, Gary and Sarah.
Okay. There was an extensive memo that was put in your packets explaining the program. As you will recall, in the FY 2020 budget process, we came to council. We asked the council to amend or propose in the fee resolution, approve a convenience fee, which is something the state allowed us to recoup, about $140,000 a year expense. And state said, you can charge your customers for that, just like anybody else, any other business does. So we went back to Springbrook. This was just before our budget hearing, I believe, our budget workshop. And Springbrook is our software program we've had since 1992 or 93, something like that. And we were told we can't do it, or we won't do it, or whatever. So we were forced to look for separate vendors to do that. We've not found a separate vendor that would be customer service friendly, shall we say, so that it's seamless to the person utilizing it. So we started looking at other solutions. And at that time, I think I mentioned that both Sandpoint and Hayden were searching for new ERP software. So we sent our people up there, Sarah, Jesse, and Renee, I think, went to those two places, looked at the software application they had. It was quite an improvement and more intuitive than the current software that we have. Springbrook has become just increasingly harder to use. As mentioned in the memo last year, we were trying to research and audit trail on some transaction. We couldn't do it because the software that we have doesn't allow it. We were told by Springbrook, well, if you upgraded to our cloud application, we could do it. That was an additional $37,000, I believe. So we were just getting higher and higher fees for what we didn't perceive to be good service. So came to council on the 18th of November, requested authority from the council for a couple of things. The first was to allow us to issue an RFQ, or what's that? RFP, you're right. RFQ is the next committee meeting. Request for proposals for ERP software. So we were looking for an enterprise-wide integrated solution, and we put that RFP out. Council also authorized us to go ahead and do this outside of the budget year. Since the timing of the discussion with Springbrook was while we were within the budget presentation process, and we knew it was going to be fairly significant expense. Informed the council at that time that if we got authority to move ahead, we would have to do that outside of the budget process. We had considered whether or not we would wait through FY 2020, bring the proposal in the 21 budget. And with the timing and everything else, that just doesn't work. The delay would have been 18 months just to get started on it. So we wanted to proceed. Came to council on the 18th, indicated at that time we thought the cost was going to be somewhere around $370,000, if I recall. We issued the RFP. That funding was going to come out of the enterprise funds for $80,000 apiece and $100 and some odd thousand out of the general fund, an unanticipated fund balance we'd identified at that time. We put out the RFP. We got 3 responses, one from Tyler Technologies, one from Springbrook, and one from BSA Software. We looked at that. Springbrook and Tyler, for different reasons, were not selected for interviews. BSA was selected for an interview. We did that the 29th and 30th, or 28th and 29th of January. And our staff, and it was a bunch of our staff, we had huge finance presence, information systems. I was present, city clerk, community development. There were some engineering folks there, and human resources as well. Again, it's an integrated solution. As you'll note in the memo, if you look at the different services included in the software, you've got all the financial management, and I'll just recount very quickly: general ledger, accounts payable, cash receipting, miscellaneous receivables, fixed assets, purchase orders, utility billing, and then the personnel management. I will note that in the past, we have tried to effect a human resource management solution, timesheets, payroll, that sort of thing through our Springbrook software. We looked at their module. Their module is not very friendly to use, so we wanted to see what these folks had as well. And so they have a payroll, HR, and timesheet module as well. There's also business licensing, which will allow our alcohol license, you name it, all the licenses that are issued by the city clerk. Should the council in the future decide that they want to look at some sort of business licensing, this software would be able to handle that as well. And lastly, local improvement district special assessments, which are currently maintained, all the LIDs are maintained downstairs in the finance department. So with that, we spent 2 days going through this with BSNA representatives. We looked at their community development module. Right now, community development permits, that sort of thing, is being handled by Permit Tracks, which is a software company from the west side of Washington. It's adequate to our needs. So one of the things that Bill Belknap and his staff wanted to do was to assess how this software would compare to the current permit tracks. This software is more expensive than permit tracks, but it is not integrated into the full suite of modules like this one would be. So we have asked BSNA, would they be willing to protect our pricing or their proposal pricing for community development for a period of 1 year? If during that time it's determined that we wish to transfer into that module, then there would be an additional expense for that. But it's the same as the proposal that they made in this proposal. So with that, just a little bit about BSNA. They are a firm, they have about 890 of these software applications out, mostly in the Midwest, down into Florida, some on the East Coast, but we would be their third customer in Idaho. Sandpoint and Hayden both selected this firm. It's one of the main things about it is it's very intuitive to use. Our finance people really liked it. The costs for maintenance, which is always a huge amount when you buy software, is around $42,000 per year, which is less than, actually much less than Springbrook, especially with their cloud-based solution. That that maintenance pricing is protected for 2 years. So it will not go up for 2 years, and after that, the contract indicates that it will increase by a cost of living or some sort of acceleration, but it isn't something, okay, it's protected for 2 years, and then after that, it's going to go up 100%. So we looked at that. We're currently in the process now of negotiating, if you will, indicating to them that they are our preferred proposal, but that, of course, is subject to council's authorization. So we're trying to get that contract, software license agreement where it needs to be. Jesse Flowers is the project manager on the project, so he will be working directly with BSNA, of course, utilizing legal resources and coordinating through the departments the implementation of the software. One of the main things here is that the business of the city will continue even while this software implementation is taking place. One of the big things that we wanted to do, and you'll notice in the pricing within the proposal, and we thought we should give you the full Monty on the proposal. It's a huge document, but it also explains implementations and modules and that sort of thing. As our information, which is currently on Springbrook, needs to be migrated over to the new software, which means there will need to be adaptation codes and that sort of thing. We also have several other programs, our Ames parking program. We've got permit tracks. We've got the timekeeping software, Sport Sites, I believe it is, out at Parks and Rec. Those all need to talk to each other. So this implementation and migration of information will also be pursued during this period of time. And BSNA does all of that. If there is something that needs to be customized, if we have a piece of software that they've not seen before, then they need to customize their software to talk to it, then there may be some additional charges for that. They won't know until they get into it. But that migration is huge. As Sarah will tell you, the people down in finance aren't sitting around twiddling their thumbs. They've got audits and budgets and the monthly stuff that they do, and that will have to continue. They will have to help facilitate the migration, but they will also have to do their regular job. This will take the estimate is anywhere from 9 months to a year to complete the transition. During that period of time, both systems will run in parallel. So the cutover to BSNA will not occur until all of the bugs are shaken out of it, and we're sure that our data is where it needs to be and the processes are set up, and staff is comfortable in working with it. So this is a big thing, and we did not undertake it lightly. I think finance was a little shell-shocked when I suggested we probably needed to get that done sooner rather than later, especially if we're losing $140,000 a year in convenience fees. The cost, it's increased somewhat. You saw in the overall pricing, after we took the modules out that we weren't going to use, comes out to just shy of $430,000. That includes $50,000 worth of implementation costs, and this firm is in Michigan, so it is going to cost some travel, and they will be on site for up to 32 days on this thing, so depending on which modules they're working on. So what we're asking authorization for is $100,000 from each of the enterprise funds, water, sewer, sanitation. Those funds are identified. They're in the operational budget under professional services. We intended to proceed with a new comprehensive plans in both the water and sewer utilities this year. We will not be doing that for a couple of reasons. One, the CIP that we're utilizing will impact that, as will the rate study, and they just need to be updated, not totally redone. So the $200,000 that we'd previously budgeted for that, we did not intend on utilizing. So we would propose utilizing $100,000 out of each of those funds. We would utilize sanitation development funding, up to $100,000 for that as well. And as I indicated on November 18th, we have unanticipated fund balance. We brought $160,000 and left that in that allocation so that if the council indicated we could move forward, that we could utilize that funding. So which brings us a total of $460,000, which gives us a little bit of contingency if there is some customization or if there are further implementation costs that weren't anticipated. Then the last thing that we're asking is that the council direct us to, after you authorize us to do this, that you direct us to bring that forward in the 2020 open budget process, which occurs after the budget hearing. It's usually the second council meeting in August. We'll come to council and ask to open the budget. We've got several other things that we'll be asking you to authorize, that you have authorized us to move forward with, that we will have to bring so council can approve an appropriation on that. With that, I'd certainly stand for any questions or invite Sarah to comment if she's got any comments to make.
Is there any group in particular that was really nervous about going through this?
All of them.
All of them.
I think the only one that probably looks at it as a real advantage, and they don't have anything now, is HR. Payroll is handled down in finance. All of the other HR functions are done upstairs. There's kind of been, it's a handwritten thing. We've got some folks, the police, for instance, have a program called Planet Police that is a scheduling program, but they can generate payroll or timesheets out of it. We've got some enterprising folks who do their own. They've made a fillable form timesheet, but it's nothing standard and nothing that's fit into it. IS, as you might guess, is always nervous about stuff, and it's not like they're just sitting around twiddling their thumbs either. Finances issues, Sarah can certainly comment on them, but what I heard was, look, we've got a lot to do. This is a lot bigger process than perhaps administration was hoping or thinking that it was. Community development, trepidation was more, look, we got something that works. Let's see if we can integrate it rather than just take something new. So we'll continue to work through that. But it's like anything else.
Yes.
The devil you know sometimes is just more comfortable than the one you don't know.
Questions?
I have a question about the section that talks about the city employee time. It estimates it would be 750 hours, and that assumes one person involved in the training per application. It's as if more employees were involved, then of course that number would go up. Are we planning for one person or more, or?
There's going to be multiple people involved, all the users. So if this was to go forward, BSNA would come on site and we'll be sitting with all the operational people. And so it's going to be a step-by-step process within each department. And so everybody who is actually a user will be being trained. I mean, there are going to be some situations where it will be a train the trainer, but those will be minimal. So for the most part, anybody who's a user going to be using the system frequently will be sitting down with BSNA staff and being fully trained, because they are big on, if we're going to implement such a large system, then you might as well start out with it right. And so they believe bringing their people in to show us and answer our questions and continuously work with us will be more beneficial than single people learning it and trying to train everyone else.
I would also note that one of the things that we were impressed by was that their average response time is 15 minutes. So if you give them a call, now they're on Eastern time, we're on Pacific time, but which is huge, because sometimes we would call Springbrook and it would be literally days
Weeks.
before we would get a response. So that's just a big deal for us.
Completely.
And then when it talks about, like, city IT staffing, a quarter FTE for the duration of the project, is the project like the 9 months that you are estimating it will
Yes.
take? Is that what the, okay.
Yeah, once it's set up, then our maintenance fees that we are paying to BSNA, that maintains the system.
So I assume you've determined that we have enough staffing to put all
Yes.
this time into it?
Yeah, and actually those numbers came from, they asked us to. So Jesse is the one who kind of
Okay.
established how much time he believed the IS would, and for each other department as well.
And I'm curious, I like that a group of you went up to Sandpoint and Hayden. So what did you see there? I mean,
Well, I think the biggest thing was, again, it was how integrated the system was. You can sit down, and right now, our modules don't talk to each other. And so you have to go from payroll to general ledger to cash receipting to wherever else you want to go. If you're sitting in front of the computer, you can be in the payroll system and drill all the way down with just clicks of a button, all the way to a copy of a check to the person that the check was written for, their amount. I mean, all of the modules talk to each other and act as one.
So in the long run, that saves a lot of
A lot
staff
of
time.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it removes a lot of the margin for error just by rekeying
Exactly.
in numbers.
Yeah.
So building on Brandy's question about IS and the staffing therein. So right now, you have, so finance has the bulk of payroll?
Finance has all of
You
payroll.
have all of payroll. Okay, so that translation from the police officers, mishmash of timesheets and everybody else is within you, and how many employees?
Well,
One
Okay.
person does payroll.
yes, one person does payroll.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I thought you were
So
asking.
then that transition of, would all of payroll then move into HR then?
No.
Oh,
The
okay.
payroll function stays in
In
finance.
finance.
The
Excellent.
payroll management, meaning maintenance of the timesheets and all those sorts of things,
It's done up.
is done upstairs,
Yeah.
and then it is reported down to payroll, and payroll
Okay.
deals with it.
Yes, and how it does the integration, though, that makes it both HR and payroll, is this system allows Kelly and Jen upstairs to enter all the preliminary employee stuff, pay, things like that, and it automatically feeds into the payroll piece. So Tara's not having to re-enter that stuff and then update it come year end
Excellent.
and everything else. It's all in one. I mean, Tara generates pay stubs. It goes into the same module of HR. People can log in monthly, pull their pay stubs, pull their W-2s, and see things instantly, where right now you're talking to several different departments.
I would wager we're losing a lot more than $149,000 a year.
Oh, with
Based
staff
on-
time we are.
Based on
Yeah.
staff time and reentry and mistake changing and all of that. I think this is really a good idea.
Yeah, one of the things we're trying to do that we've tried the last several years is to give the council a full appraisal of what things cost, whether it's what the swimming pool costs or what our maintenance of vehicles costs, that sort of thing. And you just hit the nail on the head that we're spending a ton of time and human resource on an antiquated system that
Right.
just is not user-friendly.
Well, I move that we approve this, number one, the selection of BSNA Enterprise Resource Planning Software, the license and services agreement when negotiations are complete, the funding program as outlined in the memo from the city supervisor, And then I also direct staff, or I move that we direct staff to bring the necessary appropriation forward to the city's open budget, 2020 open budget process.
I'll second that.
Awesome.
Yeah, I have one more question, but
Yeah,
I'm
please,
good with that
please
too.
do. Nope.
So what happens with the enterprise funds that we're taking from?
What do you mean, what happens to them?
Does it ever go back?
No.
Okay,
Say the utility billing, the enterprise funds all pay an allocation.
oh,
Every year,
right,
we run
okay,
an
to
allocation
IS.
model.
Yep, got it, okay.
So we make
Yep.
sure that whatever those services cost, the enterprise funds pay for, and
Okay.
this is part of it.
This is regular agenda so that we can go through this again. This is high
And-
time.
Yeah, and it's our hope that we will have a negotiated contract by, one of the reasons we weren't going to bring this for another 2 weeks, but we'd like to kick it off as quickly as
Moving.
possible.
Completely agree with that.
And our system's set for it. I mean, we don't anticipate computer upgrades and everything to
No.
go with the system. Yeah.
No, at this point, everything moving forward should be fine, and it's not going to go cloud-based and all that. So the things we have on the ground now should stay, yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, I know, it's always hard, just from a whole different line of work, changing over a
Yeah.
different whole documentation system online with everything is really tough in the beginning, but you just have to get through it, and I feel especially good about you selecting them after going there and visiting and talking with people up there who've been testing it out, so.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks, Gary. This is the end of our formal agenda. We do have a report, however, about the Police Services Facility Project Update. Mr. Belknap, once more.
Good afternoon.
Hi again.
So as the council recalls, in 2016, we completed a police services facility master plan, which at that point in time was focused on the current recycling facility site. The police facility on 4th Street has been long deemed to be deficient, was the highest priority both in the city strategic plan as well as our facilities plan that was done in 2015. We began looking at that location as being a possible location for that facility. That effort ended up with an estimated facility size of 15,300 square feet. That's kind of compared to the just a little over 8,000 square feet that they're currently in today, along with a 3,000 square foot outbuilding for some additional storage of police bikes, motorcycles, evidence storage, equipment storage, and other items. At that time, the projected 2018 construction cost of that facility was $5.3 million. And the city council chose to move forward with a bond election in May of 2019. And prior to that election, we went and updated that cost estimate because we were seeing rapid escalation of construction cost, and we then shifted location and had to accommodate for the property purchase in that project cost. So that increased the project cost to $7.89 million at that point in time for the estimate. That bond was successfully passed, and we were also able to obtain an excellent bond interest rate of 1.27%, and so now we're advancing the project. Shortly after that bond election, we issued the RFQ for the design of the facility, entered into an agreement, selected LCA Architects, began the design work in August. And through that effort, that building grew to about 17,682 square feet. And again, it was wanting to try to make sure that the facility met the long-term needs of the department. So the principal building grew from that 15,300 to 17,682, and the outbuilding grew from 3,000 to about 4,200 square feet in size. We then got a revised construction cost estimate, and we both continued to see substantial increase in construction cost in the Northwest market and the nation as a whole, as well as the additional building size. We ended up with a project estimate about $10.5 million at that point in time, which was far in excess of what we had anticipated in the bond election process. So we had to spend about 30 to 45 days working on a value engineering effort to look at potential building size reductions that would not impact their core functional needs, as well as looking at different building materials that would help us reduce cost. We have finished that effort. We brought the building down to about 16,500 square feet in size, and we were able to preserve really all of the core functions of the building. Really, the square footage reductions were somewhat minimal. We increased efficiency of circulation, eliminated some unneeded hallways. So we really tried to squeeze that space out of areas that did not compromise, the core needs and function of the facility. The structural design, initially it was envisioned as being a full masonry building, it was two stories. We shifted to masonry on the first level, actually to about 12 feet in height, and then a cement fiber siding material that's a lighter weight on that second level that gets beyond kind of your interface of the ground level. That both reduced the finished material costs and also allowed us to reduce the structural steel member sizing because it wasn't supporting as heavy a structure, and that ended up with reduction of cost. While we have brought that budget down, it still is a little bit above our estimated cost at the time that we were running the bond election. So we are sitting at just about $8.5 million right now for total project costs, including property acquisition, design, construction, FF&E, finishing, or fixtures, furnishing, and equipment on the project, and contingency. So there's about $340,000 of contingency in there. So that number is about $600,000 above the number we had estimated for the bond election. Again, we've seen that escalation, some minor building growth, but also escalation in construction cost. So the current facility looks very much like it did before, but you will see this was all kind of masonry before, so we are going to that fiber cement on the second level, still full masonry at ground level all the way around the building, still maintains the same aesthetic and design of the facility. The site layout is very similar, again, with the public parking lot here and the secured parking in the back, covered parking for the marked patrol vehicles, and two entryways to the site with our stormwater detention facility here located on the south side for stormwater treatment and detention. This is just kind of the landscape plan. The goal here is the highway sits down fairly low and this site kind of rolls up. So this area along the highway would be more native, natural landscape with some stormwater that terrace through. Most of this would be Y-scape. We really don't have much in the way of turf on the site. It would all be low irrigation, Y-scape materials, and then kind of an entry plaza feature in the front, and then kind of a rear plaza for break and outdoor access by employees at the facility. And then we have our outbuilding, storage building here located on the east side of the site. Just to orient you, this is 95 here on the left-hand side of the screen, south view there, and then Myrtle Street, which will be finished up this spring, shown on the right of the screen. Layout, it's kind of a little bit difficult to see, but we have our front lobby, records and reception, evidence processing and lab, and then evidence storage. And then we have our mechanical, electrical, and data rooms in the back. As we get back of house, we have the locker rooms, both men's and women's locker room, the wellness room, armory, and then report writing, and the corporals and sergeants' offices here, along with break room, work copy, elevator, and the stairway that goes up to the second level. And then on the second floor, we have that training room located here, and then we have our detectives and our forensic detectives or cyber detective works in the detective sergeant office, a couple interview rooms, code enforcement, parking enforcement, and then we have our administrative offices, chief, administrative assistant, captain, conference room here in the corner, and then some storage, admin sergeant located here and a couple of storage spaces there. So that kind of rounds out the building. Again, these are just kind of those elevations showing the different view of the buildings at different sides, and then just kind of perspective renderings there. So again, very, very similar stylistically to what we had envisioned initially, just a little bit of a change material to help reduce some construction cost. The outbuilding is largely two roll-up doors, one that's going to be for storage, one's for evidence processing. So if there's a vehicle that's used in a crime that needs to be secured in order for it to be processed, that will be included here. Some long-term storage, and then motorcycle, bicycle maintenance facility located here on the south end. And then we have kind of a covered service bay where we'd have access to things like windshield wipers, fluids, kind of minor vehicle maintenance they'd be doing at the building. So again, that's that covered maintenance at the south end, the two roll-up doors for the storage and evidence, and then the smaller roll-up for the bicycle and patrol motorcycle access to the building. We had initially had a pretty aggressive schedule trying to get the project to bid in January. That value engineering took us, again, that 30 to 45 days to work through that process. So we are now targeting an advertisement for bid for the week of February 20th. So that's just next week. So coming up fairly quickly, the architects are working very quickly to wrap up the final detailing on the project, all of the interior casework and storage for all the different spaces in the building and getting that together. The goal is to issue our final addendum to the bid on March 20th. So that's any last clarifications, updates to the plans, answering any questions that bidders may have on the project, with an opening somewhere around that March 26th date on the project. So just want to give you a kind of a quick update, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
This is going to sound like a dumb question, but that's okay. And I am not a construction person by any means. When I look at that roof, it looks really great, but where does the water go, like rainwater? How does that drain off?
So it's going to drain to the interior, and there'll be interior roof drains on that flat intersection. So both of those roof sheds will shed down to this interior mezzanine area, and then those interior drains will take it from there.
Thanks.
Yeah, and there'll be an overflow out the back just in case something catastrophic happened that would overflow off the backside of the building.
Bill, what was the original proposed size of the two buildings?
The original building was 15,300 square feet in the master plan and 3,000 square feet for the outbuilding. So we are now sitting at about 16,500. So we're about 1,200 feet larger on the main building, and we're about 300 square feet smaller on the outbuilding.
And what happened between the original size that was in the design or the request versus the larger now?
So what was done in 2016 was based on their understanding at that point in time. And then as you get through, and it's kind of it's a preliminary master plan. You have some conceptual floor plans, but they're really not, you're not setting furnishings in each of those individual spaces. What we encountered is as we started to lay out furnishings in individual spaces, given those size constraints, we were finding that we were just providing the space that they have today in some areas for some functions. And they were concerned about future staffing growth. If this is going to accommodate our needs for 30 to 50 years over the life of the building, we wanted to make sure that those spaces could accommodate that additional desk or workstation in those individual spaces. So we had a little bit of growth in a variety of small areas. Ones that kind of stood out were corporals and sergeants' offices. Right now, they have one desk that's shared with two individual sergeants or corporals. They anticipated they would have a third in the future. This is set up to accommodate 3 individual desks in sergeants and corporal spaces, so we had some growth there. Locker room, when we actually looked at laying out lockers, that grew a little bit beyond that was in the initial plan. Same thing with evidence storage. And then as we went upstairs, like the cyber detective space, at that point in time, we had 1. We now have 2. They think they might have 3. And so those spaces all grew a little bit to accommodate that additional staff growth. And it's always a tough one because this does need to be a facility that's going to serve the community for 50 years, but we do have a budget constraint that we're working up against. We really worked really hard to make sure that we weren't overbuilding, but we were making sure that it met that. So that's where that additional 1,200 square feet came in. That's less than 10% growth on a building of this size. As it gets, and when it gets to this design level, then it's like, this is real. And now all of a sudden, a lot of attention is placed on every little detail to make sure that they have the space that they think they need long term. And that's really where that growth happens. It's somewhat of a natural occurrence, but it grew that way, and we wanted to make sure that it did accommodate the community's needs for the life of the facility. So that's where most of that small growth occurred.
Not creation of new spaces, but enlargement of
Correct.
spaces that were determined to
Correct.
be too small.
Right.
Okay.
So we also have other elements. So we are still planning to do the solar as a bid alternate. So we're going to have a number of bid alternate packages. We're going to try to get a base bid project that we think is within our budget. And then we do have additional elements that are additional sustainability. That's going to be building insulation, additional glazing efficiency. We have the photovoltaic solar system. All of those are going to be packaged as bid alternates. And if we get favorable bidding results, the council can decide what bid alternates they would like to accept. But we're going to have a base bid that it will still be solar ready. We'll have the pathways. We'll be structurally able to support future solar installations, but we're not sure That estimate that I provided you at the 8.5 million does not include those. That would be a add-on alternate that the council could decide you want to seek other additional funding, or if the bids come back very favorable, we could take advantage of that. But it will not, there's nothing that's being done in this project to preclude it. We are roughing in for EV charging stations, both on the public side as well as the back side. We're roughing in EV charging for the covered vehicle parking areas so that we have a chase for that to come back in. We'll be roughing in a transformer location for those future EV charging stations, and the building will be set up to accommodate future solar installation if we're unable to do it at this point in time, given budget constraints.
Good.
I can tell that everyone has been working very hard at re-looking at how can you bring this price down, and I heard you talk about the aesthetics and that it will still look nice. I mean, is
Yeah.
there any other room for, I'm all about the aesthetics of the buildings, but this seems like it could be an exception in its location and its purpose, where maybe some of the other features that are desired that you just talked about, like the energy efficiency, may be of higher importance than some of the aesthetics.
And the only,
Any wiggle room there?
well, I mean, the only thing we could move away from the masonry ground floor. That would be the only thing we could move away from. We do try to, for these long-term, 50-year life facilities, we do like masonry on that ground level. It just provides that hardened surface. It's just more durable in the long run. It doesn't require, it's just a longer lasting material. That's really kind of down to, that would be the only thing. And at that point, you may save 30, 40,000 in that kind of change.
Oh.
The EV system's probably in the $250,000 range is what our estimate for the solar system is. So we're not going to value engineer back to get to something like that.
Or even come up with the extra $600,000. That's the other thing. Regardless, even if it wasn't a trade out, I mean, it would not be able to
We
cut.
have done all the cost savings that we think we can to get it within range. The masonry is really the last remaining item on the ground floor that we haven't taken out. We have stayed with steel framing. That was a question of whether we would go to a wood framing, and we just, for the quality, the longevity, the flexibility, the steel skeleton is really the best system, and especially to meet the seismic requirements that this facility as an essential facility has to meet. Our backup power generation has to be in place. All the emergency command communications and systems have to be in place on the facility. So all of that kind of core, all those things have been met, and we've tried to value engineer it the best we could. We just, the wood framing was maybe a $40,000 savings, but we're going to add cost into electrical and mechanical, because with that steel skeleton, you have all kinds of flexible space for HVAC and wiring and reconfiguration of space in the future, because it's just a freestanding skeleton that you can work within. When you start wood framing walls, then it becomes much more difficult to adjust the facility in the future. So we've analyzed pretty much everything that we think we can to try to get this as close to budget as we can. And ultimately, we'll just have to see how the bidding climate is this year. We were kind of hoping for a bit of a slowdown in the economy. I don't know if we necessarily hope for a slowdown in the economy, but we were hoping for a better bidding climate, maybe I should say. But there was a lot of activity going within the region. And so we don't know necessarily what construction pricing is going to look like this year. It has been very volatile, as you're aware, for the last couple of years. And so we will just have to see what it looks like on bid day.
Well, I appreciate you looking exhaustively at all those and being able to get it down to where you did from the 10.5 million. When the time comes where we have the alternate bids, do you anticipate being able to include in that return on investment projection, just so that we can evaluate, is that, when would that additional, how many years would it take to pay off that additional investment?
We can certainly try to do that. We can certainly engage architects and see if they can assist us with that. Things like the additional insulation, potentially energy conservation savings there, or potential generation on the solar system. We can certainly take a look at that. Try to
I think
provide the
that
best
would be-
information the council could have.
That would be pretty useful, because I hear $250,000 and I think, no, but then if there is an ROI that I need to understand better, that would be useful
Yeah.
in that final. I
And-
do know that you were exacting with the requirements on the building, so I appreciate that. I know that you guys went right down to the very, very bottom of it, so I appreciate that.
And there are two other projects that were to be funded with this bond. So we have the
Yes.
remodel of the 4th Street
Yeah.
building. We
Yes.
had an estimate of 1.5 million there. So if it was 600,000, we're taking a third out of that project. And then we had the minor remodels to the man building to do roof replacement and the masonry cracking repair and reciting of that building. So this all will have a bit of a cascading effect on those projects as well. That's something the council will need to be aware of as we look at those ad
Right.
alternates of how we fund and those other projects and needs.
Is this, will this update come to the full council, or you were just doing that
It's
here for now?
coming to public, or administrative committee
great.
today,
Okay.
so the whole council will hear it.
We had, before we're committed, we're trying to get to advertise to bid in January. We're a little bit behind that. We wanted to make sure the council was aware why that was and where we were
Awesome.
going. Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I say we adjourn. What do you think about that? That is the
Sure.
end of
Yep.
all of the agenda. Okay, thank you very much.